When we speak of salt, most minds immediately travel to the kitchen, to the seasoning that enhances the flavor of food. But in the deeper corridors of human civilization, salt has never been merely a condiment. It has been a symbol, a covenant, and in many cultures, even a currency. In biblical times, salt was more than something sprinkled on a meal. It was woven into the fabric of sacrifice, of preservation, of covenant between God and his people. To put salt in one's home, therefore, is not an act of superstition, but an act of profound remembrance. It is a way of declaring in the physical realm that this dwelling is under covenant with the Almighty. Consider the nature of salt. It preserves against decay. It holds back the rot. It ensures that what is meant to last does not spoil prematurely. In the same way, when salt is placed in your home with faith, it becomes a prophetic emblem that your household will not decay spiritually, financially, or emotionally. It is as if you are saying, "This house will not rot under the weight of curses, generational patterns, or hidden battles. It will stand preserved by the hand of God." In this way, salt speaks a language of its own. It tells the enemy, decay stops here. But salt is not only about preservation, it is also about covenant. When God entered into covenant with his people in the Old Testament, he commanded that offerings be seasoned with salt. This was called the covenant of salt. Why salt? Because salt is enduring. Unlike bread that grows stale or oil that spoils, salt remains. It symbolizes permanence, continuity, and unbreakable bond. When you place salt in your home, it is not a ritual of power in the salt itself. It is a remembrance of that divine covenant that cannot be broken. It is a declaration that your family, your bloodline, and your destiny are tied not to the fragile promises of men, but to the eternal covenant of God. Psychologically, symbols matter. Humans are not only rational beings, we are symbolic beings. A wedding ring is not just metal, it is a symbol of union. A flag is not just fabric, it is a symbol of identity and allegiance. In the same way, salt in your home is not superstition. It is symbolism that engages both the human mind and the spiritual realm. It reminds you daily that you are in covenant, and it signals to the unseen realm that your dwelling belongs to God. And let no one deceive you where symbols are absent. Imagination becomes weak, and where imagination is weak, faith loses its grip. Now reflect on the words of Jesus, "You are the salt of the earth." That is no casual metaphor. He was saying that you, by your very nature, are meant to preserve righteousness, to give flavor to life, to prevent the moral and spiritual decay of society. If this is true of your individual calling, how much more should your home, your sanctuary, embody this truth? Placing salt within it is like engraving that identity into your very walls. You are saying, "My home shall not blend into corruption. It shall stand out as a house of covenant, a dwelling of preservation, a sanctuary of holiness." Philosophically, salt also raises a profound point about the invisible versus the visible. You may not see it working, but you know it does. Salt in food disappears, yet its effect lingers in taste. Salt in preservation cannot always be seen, yet it prevents decay. Likewise, when you engage in symbolic acts of faith, you may not see instant results, but invisibly atmospheres shift. Spiritual climates change. Darkness that once felt at home begins to feel unwelcome. Salt reminds us that not all transformation is visible, but it is real nonetheless. Let us also examine how salt humbles the human ego. Salt is simple, common, unpretentious. It does not boast, yet it makes all the difference. Without it, the best meals taste flat. With it, even the simplest foods are enhanced. In the same way, when you place salt in your home, you are reminded that God does not work only through the grand or the spectacular. Sometimes he works through the ordinary, through symbols so simple that the proud overlook them. But therein lies the power, the humility of faith that activates heaven. One might ask, why put salt in the home at all? Could God not move without it? Certainly he could. But faith is not passive, it is active. Faith moves beyond thought into action, beyond belief into embodiment. Salt is one of those embodiments. Just as lifting hands in prayer does not add more volume to your words, but aligns your body with your spirit, so too does salt align your physical environment with your spiritual convictions. It is a gesture of alignment, an outward act echoing an inward reality. And so, when you take salt and place it deliberately in your home, you are not engaging in ritualism, but in covenantal symbolism. You are declaring that your walls are not neutral ground. You are saying, this space is consecrated. It belongs to God. You are creating a psychological anchor, a reminder that every corner of your dwelling is under divine jurisdiction. And what happens when the human mind remembers? It strengthens resolve, it deepens awareness, it increases vigilance against compromise. In that sense, the salt speaks not only to the spirit but to the mind. If salt in its essence is covenant, then in its practice it is also protection. Just as salt keeps meat from spoiling, it has historically been recognized as a barrier against corruption. It holds back the forces of decay, creating a line beyond which rot cannot cross. In the same way, when you place salt in your home with faith, you are not sprinkling a substance, you are drawing a boundary. You are declaring to every invisible force that would dare trespass into your dwelling, thus far and no further. We live in a world where battles are not only fought on visible stages. Many wars unfold in the unseen. Families torn apart not by accidents but by whispers of envy. Marriages strained not by incompatibility but by unseen hands planting division. Finances that collapse not because of laziness but because unseen forces drain opportunity and scatter blessing. And because these battles are invisible, many dismiss them, saying, there must be a rational explanation. Certainly, there often is. But those who reduce reality only to what can be measured miss a critical truth. Not all corruption begins in the visible. Some begins in the invisible, and by the time it manifests, decay has already taken root. This is where salt becomes powerful as a prophetic act. By placing it in your home, you are not engaging in mere ritualism. You are setting up a spiritual firewall. You are announcing that envy will not prosper here, that curses will find no entry, that discord cannot thrive in these walls. Salt, in this context, is no longer about seasoning food. It is about seasoning space with divine authority. Think about the function of salt in the natural world. It creates boundaries. Oceans are salted, and within them life is contained. Salt preserves, but it also separates. When placed in the home, it symbolizes the invisible wall between what belongs to you and what does not, between what God has entrusted you with and what the enemy seeks to contaminate. Salt becomes the line in the sand marking territory that is off limits to darkness. Psychologically, human beings need boundaries as much as they need air. Without boundaries, relationships collapse, responsibilities blur, and identities dissolve. A home without boundaries is not a sanctuary. It is an open field vulnerable to invasion. Salt, therefore, becomes both a spiritual and psychological reminder of the need for boundaries. It is a way of saying, here peace is protected, Here love is preserved. Here dignity is honored. And when the human mind sees that boundary, it reinforces vigilance against compromise. In this way, salt is both symbol and teacher. It guards against the external and disciplines the internal. Philosophically, the idea of a barrier is not about isolation but preservation. A garden without a fence is not free, it is exposed. Similarly, a home without a spiritual boundary is not liberated, it is defenseless. Salt does not imprison, it shields. It is not a wall that keeps blessing out, it is a wall that keeps corruption away. This is why faith-driven acts like placing salt matter. They shift the psychology of the household, creating an atmosphere where what is sacred remains sacred, and what is profane finds no welcome. Consider how corruption often begins subtly. Food does not rot overnight, it decays slowly. Relationships do not collapse in a moment, they erode gradually. Financial stability does not vanish instantly, it leaks drip by drip. Salt interrupts that process. In the natural, it halts bacterial growth. In the symbolic, it halts spiritual contamination. By placing it in your home, you are declaring war on the gradual erosion of your peace, your joy, your prosperity. You are saying, decay will not take root here. Now, some may argue, but is salt itself powerful? And the answer is no. Salt in itself is a mineral, common and ordinary, but faith is what gives it voice. Faith is what transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Just as water is ordinary until baptism imbues it with symbolism, just as bread is ordinary until communion makes it holy, so too salt is ordinary until faith turns it into a declaration of divine protection. The salt is not magic, it is a vessel, and when faith fills a vessel, heaven recognizes it. There is also a deeper psychological lesson here. Human beings thrive when their environments are sanctified. A house that feels unsafe breeds anxiety. A home that feels spiritually heavy drains energy. But when you create an environment marked by faith, even through small symbolic acts like placing salt, the mind relaxes, the heart opens, and the atmosphere shifts. This is not suggestion, it is alignment. For what the mind believes, the body experiences, and what the spirit affirms, the atmosphere manifests. Think also of Elisha at Jericho, who took salt and cast it into the bitter waters, declaring, "Thus says the Lord, I have healed these waters." The miracle was not in the salt, but in the prophetic act of drawing a line between bitterness and healing, between barrenness and fruitfulness. In the same way, when salt is placed in the corners of your home, you are declaring to every force of bitterness that the line has been drawn. You are declaring to every whisper of destruction that the barrier is in place. In truth, salt reminds us that protection is both invisible and powerful. You cannot see the bacteria it halts, yet your food remains fresh. You cannot see the forces it symbolizes against, yet your spirit senses the shift. This is the nature of faith. It works in realms unseen, yet its fruits are undeniable. And so, as you place salt in your home, do not do it as one following a superstition. Do it as one making a declaration. Let your heart say, envy shall not enter here, despair shall not linger here, corruption shall not fester here. My home is preserved, my family is shielded, my destiny is guarded. If salt is covenant, and if salt is protection, then salt is also transformation. It is not enough to preserve what already exists, nor to defend what is under attack. Salt also has the power to change situations, to shift conditions, to make bitter things sweet and barren things fruitful. The Bible records that when the waters of Jericho were bitter, when the land was unproductive, and the city languished under the curse of barrenness, the prophet Elisha reached for salt. He cast it into the waters and declared, "Thus says the Lord, I have healed these waters. Never again shall they cause death or barrenness." The miracle was not in the mineral, but in the prophetic act. The salt became the medium through which God's transformative power flowed. What was bitter became sweet. What was cursed became blessed. What was unproductive became fertile. That is the deeper symbolism when you put salt in your home. You are not simply preserving or protecting, you are inviting transformation. You are declaring that what has been bitter in your household shall become sweet, that what has been stagnant shall flow with abundance, that what has been barren shall yield fruit. Salt in this sense is not superstition, it is faith crystallized into action. It is the physical expression of an inner conviction that God is able to reverse, restore, and renew. Psychologically, this act has immense significance. Human beings often feel trapped in cycles of debt, cycles of conflict, cycles of disappointment. These cycles imprint themselves on the mind, making the individual believe that tomorrow can only mirror yesterday. Salt, as a symbol, disrupts that cycle. It whispers to the subconscious, the old pattern is broken, a new order begins. To place salt in your home is to interrupt the psychology of despair and to announce the possibility of change. It is to plant a visible sign that the invisible cycle has been disrupted. Philosophically, salt embodies paradox. It is both common and extraordinary, both ordinary and profound. It disappears into what it touches, yet its effect is undeniable. That paradox reflects transformation itself. When change begins, it is rarely visible. A seed beneath the soil breaks quietly before it sprouts. Water begins to boil silently before steam rises. In the same way, when you engage in symbolic acts of faith, transformation begins invisibly, quietly, silently, but its fruits are undeniable. Salt reminds us that unseen processes can produce visible results. Consider how salt alters the taste of food. Without it, even the most elaborate meal feels flat. With it, even the simplest dish feels satisfying. Transformation in life often works the same way. It is not always about the grand change of circumstance. Sometimes it is about the subtle shift in perception. Salt changes taste just as faith changes outlook. The home where salt is placed becomes not only a place of covenant and protection, but a place of renewed perspective. You begin to see possibilities where once you saw impossibilities. You begin to expect abundance where once you anticipated lack. You begin to live in hope where once despair had its throne. Let us also reflect on how transformation requires cooperation. Salt cannot season food unless it is applied. It cannot preserve meat unless it touches it. It cannot heal water unless it is cast into it. In the same way, transformation in life requires our participation. God can and does move sovereignly, but he also calls us to act in faith, to embody belief through tangible steps. Placing salt in your home is one such step. It is your way of saying, I will not merely wait for change, I will embody change. I will not merely hope for transformation, I will participate in its initiation. It is important to emphasize again, the power is not in the salt itself. The salt is but a symbol, a conduit. The power lies in faith, and faith is what invites God to move. Symbols without faith are empty. Faith without symbols is often fragile. But faith with symbols becomes potent, tangible, and enduring. Just as the wedding ring does not make one married, but reminds both partners of their covenant, so too the salt does not transform in itself, but serves as a reminder, a declaration, a visible anchor of faith, and when that faith is alive, transformation follows. The bitter atmosphere in the home begins to sweeten. Arguments that once lingered in the air lose their grip. Tension begins to dissolve and peace takes residence. Opportunities that once seemed blocked begin to open. Creativity flows, ideas emerge, relationships mend. You realize that transformation is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is gradual, subtle, like salt dissolving unseen, but altering everything it touches. We must also note that transformation is not only external but internal. It is not only about finances improving or relationships healing. It is also about the heart itself being renewed. When salt is placed in the home, it whispers to the inner self, bitterness must end. It challenges the heart to let go of grudges, to release resentment, to embrace forgiveness, for no home can truly be transformed if the hearts within it remain unyielding. Salt becomes a reminder that bitterness is not destiny, that healing is possible, that forgiveness is the pathway to freedom. And so, the act of putting salt in your home becomes more than ritual. It becomes prophecy. It becomes participation in the divine flow of transformation. It becomes a declaration that this house, this family, this destiny will not remain bitter, barren, or broken. It will be healed, restored, and fruitful.